Uh,
Hi, I'm Gigi Haycock, one of the SF Doc Fest Film Festival programmers. And with me today is Jameson Stallsworth,
Oh,
who is one of the co-directors of A Man Called Hurt, The Life and the Music of Mississippi John Hurt. And thank you so much for taking the time to, join us here today to talk about, this amazing musical film and the history of a man that obviously has left an impression on so many musicians. We were just talking about, though, at this moment about the about his museum. Can you give us a little bit of what's happened there?
yeah. So a great deal of the film talks about the Mississippi John Hurt Museum, which was built in his original home that he lived in, which was just like a small shotgun shack. And Mary Frances Hurt, the granddaughter of Mississippi John Hurt, she put a lot into getting that house moved onto that property, getting a lot of memorabilia put together, some original furniture. Um, and so a big part of the film talks about her efforts and talks about that particular museum, which was very special to her and to fans. And just after finishing the film, uh, almost the day that we hit export on the final film project, we got word that a fire had broke out and the entire museum was lost. And the next day we were, reading news articles. NPR picked up the story, and it's just devastating, and in a very eerie sort of way, because we had become so attached to that museum, it being such a big focus in the film, and just kind of had this linkage to it that suddenly it was gone, and so we had kind of the last documentation of that particular structure and some of the things that were within there.
Yeah, yeah, and I did see some things that there's also a foundation associated with this too. And I hope that something can come from seeing this film to help, the foundation kind of establish and reestablish, his legacy in some form or another.
Yeah, that's the Mississippi John Hurt Foundation, which is led by Mary Frances Hurt, the granddaughter, and who's also the executive producer of this documentary. Um, Already there's been an outpouring of fans and aficionados and people who have loved and supported the museum in the past, and it's been great to see that much attention given to this tragedy, that everyone just kind of has an optimistic spirit going forward. Like, they want to continue to provide, a sense of the memory of his music and the life that he had as a human being as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that I mean, it's been said, historians have said that he's not a typical, Delta bluesman because of the peacefulness and what he sang about. And it was very reflective in the people that were interviewed in the film about just his different style of 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 how he went about, creating his specific kind of music.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because we've all got like a sense of what the blues sounds like. There's that kind of like typical 12 bar blues and everything that's real, has a lot of soulfulness, some despair and pain in it. And then here is this guy who had a life that was every bit as painful as these other blues players, but out of his music just came this bouncy, buoyant joyfulness. So it really was kind of the opposite of what you think of a blues player, that in sometime somehow in the midst of all the tragedy that he lived, that he just kind of developed this type of music almost out of nowhere. um and I think that's one of the most fascinating aspects of him as an artist. Just, how almost like in a vacuum in the middle of nowhere with no one teaching him how to play guitar, where does this music come from? And
Right.
must have just been touched by something special. I don't know.
Yeah, he went away and came back and was like sainthood. It was said something in the film about that. There was some sort of, that feeling around him. And you can tell that by the interviews that you had. And how did you choose or the musicians that you interviewed in the film?
A big part of it came from, well, a lot of connections that Mary Frances had. These were musicians that she had met with before, had come down to Mississippi to the museum where they held festivals. They used to do festivals year after year before, COVID. And, John Sebastian of the Loving Spoonful, he was down there. Guy Davis was down there. And so these were people that were kind of they were friendly with the Hurt family, and very much very much connected to that music. And John Sebastian, who's a music legend in his own right. It was incredible to kind of hear him and just see how emotionally he was impacted by, John Hurt. I mean, that's where, the name Loving Spoonful came from, was, coffee blues. So it was great to see someone who was like the American Beatles talk about how important, John Hurt was to him. And it was a great adventure in that way.
How did you and Alex get involved in deciding to make this film?
It really came about by a lot of different circumstances, particularly Paul West, who is the film's producer. He kind of became the go-between. He got us connected with Mary Frances Hurt, and she essentially reached out to anyone just wanting to kind of tell some of the stories about her and her family. And she just didn't really know how to go about it. Paul and Alex knew each other, and so he came by our offices at Draft Agency and was just kind of telling us, what he was looking for. And some of us, we heard Mississippi John Hurt, and we were just like, oh, that, what an opportunity that would be. And so we already had like this in to, to tell a story that we knew was there. And then it just became like a big, passion project. It was just something that we worked on over the course of a few years, just in between some of the commercial work that we do to pay the bills.
Yeah.
We would travel down to Mississippi or up to New York and try to get as much of this content as we could for this film.
Yeah, you had a lot of great, archival images and recordings and things like that. That must have been quite a feat to get together. I'm sure Mary Frances Hurt helped with a lot of that, but
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And there was a lot of people, some of the archive, or a lot of the archive film was actually given to us by just an archive library, that they just had a lot of this Mississippi John Hurt film that, hardly anybody had seen, was, and so it was just by, happenstance that someone from the archive library met, Paul West, our producer, and said, hey, how can I help? And that's kind of the nature of this film, was just a lot of people coming together and saying like, how can we help? And so there's a great like communal sense about the whole thing in that way.
I feel like he would be smiling because he was always smiling to know that
Yeah,
that was
I
what.
think so. I felt like his presence after a while was sort of like was sort of touching all of us.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I really loved this film, and there's so much that I feel like music I've heard since, that I hadn't really thought about, but once you hear him play, that you realize that it is how much influence it. I mean, what a wide variety of musicians that he's influenced.
Yes,
Um, I feel like there's a little Johnny Cash in there for me. Um,
for sure. I think Johnny Cash definitely had a lot of that style growing up in that region, and I think even did a number of his songs, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. I mean, John Henry is a famous Johnny Cash tune, but it's Spike Driver's Blues as told by Mississippi John Hurt. So you see how this sort of like thread of
Mhm.
folklore gets continued through this type of music, which is really, American music.
Yes. Yeah. So, and he was called Daddy John. I mean, it seems to go right
Yeah.
along with it, like, nurturing in a way, you feel like that. And he had feeling coming through, like he was shining, it seemed like throughout his music, and that comes over across the film so well. And I think you all did such a great job, and I'm excited for people to see this film.
No,
And
I appreciate it. Yeah.
yeah, and I really appreciate your time today to do this. And
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, great. All right. So thanks everybody for watching. And also thank you, Jameson.
All
Have a great day.
right, you too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.